in Kansas City, because you think about hotbeds in terms of the Cosa Nostra, right? You're looking obviously to New York, Chicago, early on, New Orleans.
Mhm.
As I understand, and I did a little more research on this interview with you because kind of started with some brothers who fled Sicily. Like, give us like and it's been about 190 years old. So give us the background or the origins of the Kansas City Cosa Nostra.
Oh boy, a lot of those old names I
Yeah,
struggle with. The more modern ones, the ones that came along around Prohibition,
yeah,
I'm more familiar with. But
yeah,
we had a Black Hand. We had it's the usual story, just like you
yeah,
had in those other cities that you mentioned. A lot of
yeah,
Sicilians came to Kansas City, and in
yeah,
our city, they settled in the same neighborhood all around the Sacred Heart Catholic Church, which
yep,
was there to help newly arrived immigrants, and that Catholic Church is still there today, and has helped other groups of newly arrived immigrants to this day. And so they settled in and extorted money from shopkeepers.
yeah.
Of which our more modern boss, a man named Nick Civella, his dad was one of those. His father was a shopkeeper down there that they
Wow.
extorted money from, and he came up. He was born around the turn of the century, 1910, 1912 himself, and he came up in those days. And in those days, 1920 or so, 25. We have Prohibition coming in, and he was, a young guy involved in that, and had a little crew that he was a tire thief. They stole tires. That was, if you go back in the old newspapers, you'll find that was a pretty popular thing to steal. And there's a big market for tires out there. And so his crew stole tires, robbed crap games and other gambling games that weren't protected. And he actually, over his career, he during the later 30s, he and his crew robbed some games that were protected, and he ran to Chicago. He had to go into hiding, and somebody we think it was a guy named Charlie Cherry Nose Gio. He took him in up there,
Oh, wow.
and kind of mentored him because he developed some really close connections in Chicago during those times in his younger days. Kansas City already, they always historically have had a close ties to Chicago.
Chicago before, yeah.
Yeah, some people would. It's kind of like Milwaukee. Some people say the Milwaukee family, and they have a family with a with a boss up there, and
that's true.
the same development. But some people would say they were like a crew of Chicago outfit. Now we probably had more than crew status, but we definitely had a subservient role to Chicago.
But you cannot say or discuss the Kansas City mob without talking about Nicholas Civella or Civella, depending how you say it, Civella, and he wasn't a joke. And KC, and we won't get the straw man yet. I want to, we kind of built up to pre-prohibition, after prohibition. Let's kind of go through who he was. I think and how Kansas City not only kind of came a certain level of prominence, but I stood on the National Commission. So why don't you give a little bit more about him and how the Kansas City mob kind of rose up to prominence?
Correct. Well, when he came back, he had to run one other time. They actually killed a guy named Buggy Ants, who was one of his crew, and he got in trouble with him one more time. And the story is, of course, there are always stories, but the story is he didn't like these old guys, and he was not going to knuckle under to them. And they were some of the same men who extorted money from his father.
Interesting.
And he would never knuckle under him. He wanted to have his own crew. He wanted to be his own man. And that's not, you can't be your own man in a crime family.
That's right.
When you first come in, when you're young, and he got in trouble, and they killed one of his guys, and he ran to Chicago again. This was the second time. This was probably, I'm trying to think, this was just prior to World War II or during World War II. He spent some time up there until after the war. Well, during the war and right after, we had some changes as the old guard was going out.
Yeah.
There was a man named Charlie Benaggio. And there was two guys, Charlie Benaggio and Charlie Gargata. kind of took it over. There was a guy named Tony Rizzo, who was a big gambler, and he had kind of been the boss, but he was not a very good boss, and was not really comfortable in the boss role. And with a lot of the different facets, Charlie Benaggio was a great boss. He had the politicians eating out of the palm of his hands. He knew the political game, and he knew the mob game. And Charlie Gargata, they called him the two Charlies. He was more the enforcer type and took care of things on the street. Benaggio was an upfront guy, but he was the boss. He was also the political boss of the political faction here in Kansas City.
But so hold on, to the point that he actually helped make